Well, we're now seeing that the left hand can perform the problem and that the right hand cannot. Now the question becomes, what happens when you allow both hands together to try to solve the problem? And what we find out is that they fight over each other. One hand knows how to do it, and one hand does not, and so they more or less squabble. And the reason for this is that the hemispheres are disconnected. The right hemisphere controls the left hand, and the left hemisphere controls the right hand. And these are almost mutually independent systems. It was as if two people were fighting over performing this task. One knew how and one didn't, and one would fight for dominance of the situation.
But when Joe is given the same task, his two hands operate as if controlled by two separate brains. What's happening is that each half of Joe's brain is given a separate instruction. He's asked to fix his eyes on the cross in the center of the screen. Anything flashed to the right of the cross goes only to his left hemisphere. Things to the left go to his right hemisphere. Because the two don't communicate, each hand does only what its half of the brain sees.
Wow, look at that. It's really like two different people doing the same.
That's right.
Same task.
That's the idea.
Why don't you try drawing another picture of it over here if that will help you?
Oh, phone.
Oh, okay.
Durr.
It's almost as though somebody has given him a secret communication.
That's
and
right.
Now he knows that it's a telephone. But up until then, he was blind to it.
Exactly.
But it's really interesting.
Yeah.
It's a picture here of somebody communicating almost with another person.
And the communication is not occurring inside the head, it's occurring out on the piece of paper.
Yeah.
I've been doing this for 35 years. Yeah.
And
It gets me every time.
Yeah, it must. It must. When Gazzaniga first did this experiment, it instantly proved that the ability to speak resides almost exclusively in the left hemisphere.
One of the unique things to the human brain is this need to interpret why two events occurred. What was the antecedent of this? What caused this? And if you can imagine that a species like us that has that little chip in its brain that asks those questions is going to survive rather well, because it's going to figure out more about the nature of the world than a species that doesn't have that.
Good job.
Mike seemed pleased. Are you having a moment?
This is too good.
When it comes to what gives the human mind its power, the ability to reason, to invent, to interpret the world around it, Mike Gazzaniga's 30 years of research has taught him which hemisphere he wouldn't want to be without.
The old phrase around our lab is, don't leave home without your left hemisphere. That's where the action is.
In my early part of my career, and continues, I studied patients who had their two brains disconnected. What we were responsible for was working out the functions of each hemisphere. You could work with them independent of the other influencing it, so you kind of got to study it alone. And over many, many years, the basic finding is, of course, that one brain didn't know what the other one was doing in such people, that the information doesn't transfer between the brains. We found out that in the left brain, there's a special system that seems to always want to explain actions and moods that we have after they occurred. So we would put a question to the right non-speaking hemisphere, and it, in effect, would direct the left hand to do something. And so the patient would do that. And then we would simply say to the patient, well, why did you do that? The patient would make up a story that would explain why their hand had done one thing and why the other hand had done another thing, and wove a tale that made coherent, as it were, the behaviors that are coming from all these separate brain areas. The behavior comes out, and then there's this little narrator up there that turns it into a story that makes us feel coherent and unified. Turns out it's a thing in the left hemisphere that does this. And we called it the interpreter. And it's a very powerful force in the human condition, and it's always trying to figure out and seek explanations for our behavior. And that's what it does.